Generally speaking, going into every NBA season, you have a pretty good idea of what to expect from most NBA teams and what their current goal and objective is. You have teams like the Celtics, the Bucks, the Sixers who are going to be competing at the top of the East and pushing for a championship. Same with teams like the Nuggets, Thunder, and Timberwolves in the West. Then, of course, there are those teams that probably think they're competing for a title, but realistically aren't there. Then you have the teams that aren't looking to compete now, but rather rebuilding for the future, some outright tanking and trying to lose to secure a top lottery pick and a chance at drafting a generational talent. Then you have those teams in the middle, teams that aren't really good enough to truly be competing for a title, at best are maybe a first round exit or a play-in team, but also aren't bad enough to be putting themselves in a position to get a top pick. No man's land, oftentimes referred to as NBA purgatory. And while there are quite a few teams that fall into this category, there was one team in particular that is going into the season that has the biggest question mark in terms of their overall future, a team that made an all-in type move to try and get themselves over the top, all but to fall short of expectations and quickly pivot from another direction, a team that has a star, a young star, one of the best scorers in the game, a team that has some young talent, but a team that just hasn't figured out how to play well together. And yes, I'm talking about the Atlanta Hawks. And so in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Hawks. What does this upcoming season look like for them, and how will this season impact their overall future? As always, if you're new to the channel, you like this type of content, then be sure to subscribe to help the channel grow. And in return, I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, when the Atlanta Hawks surprised the NBA world as this Cinderella team in 2021 that went all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, and doing so with a young up-and-coming star, a young core, and a bright future, it was believed at the time that the Hawks were the next team up. They were on their way to contention in the near future, given how quickly they had risen from being one of the worst teams in the league to the conference finals in such a short period of time, and having one of the youngest stars in the game who hadn't even entered his prime yet. But the following season, just like the Hawks had surprised everyone with their play in 2021, they surprised fans by barely making it to the playoffs in 2022, needing the play-in to secure the 8th seed and getting obliterated in the first round of the postseason. The team had regressed, and they knew they had to do something about it to get them back on the right foot. Thus, they made a blockbuster trade to land all-star DeJounte Murray from the Spurs to pair alongside Trae Young and hopefully mask some of his defensive deficiencies. But getting Murray at a price, of course, a price that would mortgage a fair amount of their future in the form of 3 first-round picks, 2 of those picks being unprotected. One of them, of course, being an unprotected pick for this upcoming draft in 2025, a draft that is projected to be one of the deepest drafts of the past decade. And in there lies the uncertainty for what we can expect from the Atlanta Hawks this season. Because after it was clear that the Trae Young DeJounte Murray experiment did not work after 2 seasons of disappointing play that saw the Hawks getting bounced in the first round in one season and bounced from the play-in in the other, the Hawks chose to move on and trade DeJounte Murray for a picks and young player-based package that included 2 first-round picks, Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance, and Cody Zeller. Nance and Zeller, of course, being the veteran players in the deal to make the money work. And normally a trade like this makes sense, where a team has a star or fringe-level star player in their prime, but the team has seen less than favorable results, cutting your losses and trading one of your more valuable trade assets to a team looking to contend in exchange for future-based assets, perhaps looking to take a small step back for a larger step forward for the future. But the problem for the Hawks is they don't have the luxury of taking a step back for this upcoming season and trying to get a top pick in a stacked draft class. Their pick is going to the Spurs, regardless of where it lands. They don't have the luxury of just throwing this season away and trying to land, say, a player like Cooper Flagg to change their franchise's fortunes. But as currently constructed, they're nowhere close to being a competitive team, especially after losing DeJounte Murray. Now, maybe perform better than expected without the power dynamics of who's going to handle the ball with Murray no longer on the team. Perhaps this opens up more opportunity and a green light for a player like Jalen Johnson, who really broke out last season as a bona fide piece they can build with for the future. Dyson Daniels, who I'm actually very high on and believe he has a lot of potential if given the right opportunity. Maybe he breaks out in a new environment, a new role. And then, of course, they have their number 1 overall draft selection from this past draft in Zachary Risacher, who, to no fault of his own, just being a weak draft class, is probably going to be a pretty underwhelming number 1 pick compared to those who have been taken first overall in the past. Like, the Hawks have some stuff going for them. They've got some decent young talent, and then of course they have Trae Young, a star in his prime, 26 years old, one of the better offensive players in the league between his scoring and playmaking, But at the end of the day, this isn't a contending team, and they don't have the ability to make themselves a contending team this season, say by trading for a star, because they don't have the trade assets to make that work or the money to do so. But they also don't have the ability to just tear it all down. Trade Trae Young to the highest bidder, trade or move Capella on his expiring deal, trade Bogdanovich to a contender looking to add some scoring and just lose as many games as possible from there. That only favors the San Antonio Spurs. Now, that said, depending on what they can acquire in trading all their vets, that could put them in a position to rebuild and rebuild quickly despite sending their pick this year to San Antonio. But reports have indicated that the market for Trae Young isn't as robust as the Hawks would like for it to be. Some even going as far as to say that the Hawks, if they could, would have already traded Trae Young by now. But teams around the association aren't willing to give up a haul for a player that hasn't impacted winning, is a liability on defense, and on a max contract. Yeah, teams are going to be wary of giving up their future for that under the new CBA. Capella doesn't have much value on the trade market like he's had in the past, especially on an expiring contract where he could leave next summer in free agency. And Bogdanovich is nice, but he still has 3 years left on his deal and is 32 years old. You're not going to get an insane value for him in return. So I don't see a scenario where the Hawks could move all of these guys and get enough draft capital or young players where they can just throw away a high lottery pick in a stacked draft to the Spurs. And look, the Hawks haven't done themselves any favors when it comes to their cap sheet. They're an over-the-cap team, just shy of the luxury tax for the season. They're going to have to pay Jalen Johnson, who is extension eligible before the start of the season. Otherwise, he'll be a restricted free agent this summer. And he's not going to be cheap given his production and upside. Bogdanovich, like I said, still has 3 years left on his deal, as does Trae Young. DeAndre Hunter, who has disappointed for them after giving him a big extension, he still has 3 years left on his contract. Onyeka Okongwu was just extended on a long-term deal. They're eventually going to have to pay Dyson Daniels, as I doubt they're going to let him walk after including him in that DeJounte Murray trade. They're about to go into cap hell with very few avenues out, and cap hell for a mid-team. As a Bulls fan, I know the pain of this all too well. And so the reason I say this team has the biggest question mark going into the season is because it'll be interesting to see what they do. Because you would expect they're still going to try and win. It's not going to bode well for Trae Young if they try and go the tanking route. But if they still push to keep trying to compete and it doesn't go well, like last season, and say they stay in the middle of the pack of the Eastern Conference below or near 500, what do they do then? Do they keep pressing on because they know there isn't any value in pivoting to tanking for the rest of the season, knowing they don't have their pick? Or do they just say, screw it, we know we don't have our pick, but this team isn't going anywhere? It would be better to go on a fire sale, treat the pick as a sunk cost, try and recover as much of their future as they can that they gave up for DeJounte Murray, which, by the way, they're still going to owe their pick to the Spurs in 2027, which is top 5 protected, but recover what they can and start fresh. Start fresh with Risacher, Jalen Johnson, and some of their other young guys like Daniels, Okongwu, and Kobe Buffkin even. Honestly, don't know. I have no idea what to expect from this team going into the season. Like, there is still the possibility that they could show up well with a bit of a new look roster with no more DeJounte Murray, not contending worthy, but maybe a solid playoff team. Or they could fail miserably, decide to tear it down mid-season, and finish as one of the bottom 3 teams in the East. No idea. And if I'm honest, I don't even think the Hawks really know what they're trying to do with their approach and strategy going into the season and beyond. I feel like they will probably hang on to Trae Young for too long, as it's hard to let a star like him go, and then when they do try to move him, it'll be too late. They'll delay the inevitable of restarting and believing they can create a championship-level team with Trae Young as the centerpiece. As I've said before, the worst thing that could have happened to the Atlanta Hawks was actually making the conference finals in 2021 and giving them this false sense of hope that they were right there to win a title, and kept doubling down on this rather than moving in another direction. I would love to hear what you guys think, though. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.